Namaskar, my name is Manish Kumar and I welcome all of you to my channel. So in today's video we are going to talk about incremental loading that we did in the last lecture as well, and there were some issues that I was facing. So I got the reply from the GitHub page or GitHub bug issue where I raised. So now that issue is resolved, so we are going to learn about that as well. And also there are few concepts from Python operator that has to be discussed. So we are going to discuss all those in today's video. So without further delay, we will go to the laptop screen and discuss everything in detail. Alright, so I am at laptop screen and we are going to talk about incremental loading, which is very required in data engineering world, and then Python operator. Because Python operator is one of the most used operator that we have in the Airflow. So we are going to talk about this in detail. Although we have understanding of Python operator, but there are few things that needs to be discussed in today's video. Okay, so this question we have already discussed, like what is operator, why do we need operator. These questions are already discussed in last, like I think in one of the videos in our playlist. So if you are not comfortable with this question, then I think you should revisit your lecture number, I think 3 or something, and then you should continue this video. And then what all operator you have worked with. So the major one will be bash operator and Python operator, and then if you are associated with any cloud technology, then there will be some operators, like if we talk about AWS, then S3 operator, EMR operator, those operators will be there. And then how to do incremental loading in Airflow, that we are going to learn today. In last class also we did understand about the scheduling part where this incremental loading will be done, but how at runtime value will be passed, that we are going to talk today. So what is the agenda that we are going to write one DAG file today, and what we are going to achieve is so we already have the API, right? You must be knowing about this API from lecture 2 itself, where we have a product page, checkout page, and user login page. So from API, what we are going to do, we are going to pull the data, right? Pull the data on a daily basis, and then we will push this data to one of the directory, right? Push the data. So basically we are going to write one Airflow ETL pipeline which will pull the data from API and push the data into another machines. For now we don't have any machines as such, like S3 or ADLS or GCS. We don't have anything as such. What we are going to do to mimic the same thing, we are going to push this file into one of the folder which is called output files. This is also discussed in one of the file in one of the videos, right? So output file is the directory where we are going to push all the files which we are going to pull the data from API. So this is what we have to do in today's video, and of course with the help of Python operator, right? So we are going to use Python operator, and all these things has to be done incrementally. So no one is going to pass the data on a daily basis. Now date on a daily basis, because if you remember Python API requires two payload request, right? Two payload request, like a start date and end date. So now first we will go to the API. We will first hit the API, and now you should be familiar with API and Python code. So what I'll do, I'll go to the local host 5000. For me it's 5001, but most probably for you it will be 5000, because I was not able to start the server on 5000 port, so that's why I did it at 5001, but for you mostly it will be 5000. Okay, so now this all API we have get all login user. So what I'll do, I'll go to this get all endpoint and I will pull all the data. So to pull all the data, I'll just remove the limit here, and start date and end date is today's date, which is 4th Jan. So I'm going to pull this data. So I pulled this data, right? Now already Swagger gives us the curl command which can be used to pull the data. through curl, right? So I'll copy this curl, right? And because we are going to use Python operator, not the bash operator, right? So that's why we are not going to use curl command. We are going to convert this curl command into Python request body. So for doing that, you can take use of AI tools, or what I do, I go to the Postman, I pass this curl command, and if the API hits properly, then I just get the Python code from there. In one of the video in my Python playlist, I was talking about how to use Postman and how these things are done. So I'm just going to show you. I already have a Postman downloaded. You can do the same with the help of AI tools as well. Like just ask, convert this curl command into Python request module to pull the data, right? What I'll do, I'll paste this curl command here. Now you see this curl, when I pasted this curl command, this method got changed from get to post and all those things. Okay, now I'll just click send. When I click send, I should have received the data, but I did not receive the data. It says not authenticated, right? So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to authorize it. So I'll go to authorization tab and then basic auth. You remember, right? We already have this API which needs to be authorized. This API, you cannot hit the API without a username and password. This kind of case are almost always there in real-time industry. So that's why I have just mimicked all the things that is done in the real time, right? So I just use this basic authorization. Now I'll try to send it and see. Now I'm getting the data, right? So now my curl command is proper. If you go to the curl command, right, now you see here authorization things was not there when I was hitting on Swagger, right? If you go there, there was no authorization header here. But if I go here, I can see authorization is also there, and in authorization there is a value. This string is there, right? This string is nothing but a username and password in base 64 decoded format. So if I just pass here and if I decode it, you can see admin and MANISH. This is the value basically stored there in the base 64 format, right? Now I'll come back, and here, okay, this is already giving me Python, because mostly for you it will be curl like this, but since I think for last lecture I just clicked Python here, so it was giving me Python code. So what I'll do, I'll go to here and I will use this, not HTTP client, I'll use request module. So this is the code that is there. Now I'll copy this snippet, and now I am going to write our DAG. So to write our DAG, I have just given this name a incremental API data load.py. Here I'll just paste the entire content, but you know, right, this is not how we write the DAG. This is the DAG folder inside which I have created this one. Incremental API load.py is the one that I was talking about in the last lecture for Hindi channel, and this is for English channel. So that is where I just gave the name a underscore to create two different files. Okay, now what we have to do, we have to, I'll just comment all these things because this is not required for me. Like this will be required in a moment, but not right now. First we have to create our DAG structure, and now you know how to write the DAG. We have talked in detail about how to write your first DAG, and just I'm going to do the same thing, and then I'll be back with after that code, and then we'll talk about how can we integrate this API data to pull this information and put it into one of the output files folder, which is here, right? Okay, so I'm just writing the code from Airflow, import SDK, then Python operator, datetime, right? These are all things required. Now I'll create DAG. So this is the code that we already know, right? I just created a DAG object and created one task which is of type Python operator, right? And I just passed the required argument. Now what I have to do, I have to fetch the data, right? To fetch the data, these all things will be required, right? I have to pass the URL, then payload, and then headers, and then we can call response equal to request dot request, and then pass the type, and then URL, then header, and then payload, right? All these things if I pass, I should get the data. So what I'll do, I'll copy this entire content, right, and put it inside this method. There is nothing that you don't know, and if you are having trouble in any of the syntax, even a single word, then you should go to the playlist and watch again. Everything has been discussed in detail, so I'm not going to discuss it again, right? I'll just uncomment this, right? Okay, I just uncommented this, and I'll uncomment these two import statement as well. And by this way we have written our first DAG, which will basically use Python operator, and it will use to pull the data using the URL. Now we are good with the DAG, like we have written the DAG properly. So now I'll go to the localhost 8080. Okay, localhost 8080. I'll go to the DAG tab, and here you can see a_incremental API data load. I gave the name because I had another channel, and that is where this a_ is given, just to make it unique, right? I'll go to run. It failed. Now I'll see why it is failing, right? I'll go to the task. Now you also understand how to go to the UI, what all UI this talking about. Every tab has been discussed in detail, right? So here it says task failed with exception. Okay, it says connection error, HTTP connection pool, localhost, and 5001 port. Now understand properly, in most of the real-time scenario also this kind of issues occur very frequently, right? And why this is happening now, let me go to here on the notebook and talk in detail. So see, one is API, right? API is running, and there is Airflow cluster, right? This is Airflow cluster, this is API, right? These two are running in different container, right? But in one of the video I had talked about, they should be on same network, right? If they will not be on same network, then again we will not be able to hit, right? But the API endpoint, right, the endpoint that we passed is having local host, but Airflow container does not understand local host. So basically it will understand local host, but it will, I think that is a part of DevOps and networking. I'm not pretty sure how that local host internally gets translated. So here what we have to do, we will have to pass, instead of local host we will have to pass the container name. If we pass the container name, then Airflow can find that container because they are on same network, and can go to that container and then port number, and then it can hit this API endpoint. That is why this is giving connection error. So we will have to pass this container name. Now how will I know that what is the container name of my API, right? So if we go to the code, right, if I go to here Docker compose file, you can see here clearly we have written what is the container name. Container name is fast API -app. So instead of localhost, we are going to give the container name. So I'll again come to the file, and rather than localhost, what I'll pass here fast API app, right? Now I'll run again. I'll just do trigger. It's in running state. Okay, again it is failing, and again it is saying connection error, fast API app, and port 5001. So now again we'll go to the code and see, understand here in Docker compose file we have written 5001 port mapping to 5000 in the container. So left side is the machine host on which this code is running, right? So it's on my laptop, right? So that 5001 port is diverting to 5000 port inside the container. So that is what it has been written. So rather than 5001, I will have to write 5000, which in your case you might have written, because for you it won't be an issue, but for me I think 5000 port was taken for some other process, that's why I took 5001, right? Now I saved it. I'll retry again, right? I'll trigger. So this is how we have to resolve the error. So now I can see this is a success, and I'm seeing all the, so I think there was a print statement, so it is printing all the data. Now our DAG is running, so successfully we have ran the DAG, which is fetching the data from the API, but we have to store this data as well, right? So to store this data, again we'll have to write the output file. So if I have this response, right, so what I'll do, I'll just collect this data into JSON format, and now I'll write this data into JSON format. Where will I be able to write? I'll be able to write in output files. Why will I be able to only write in output files? Because again, if you go to the Docker Compose file of Airflow, not the API code, then somewhere we had mapped this output file as well. See, I have mapped. So if I will not map this file location, then I won't be able to store this data in output files. Okay, and output files doesn't mean that I have to pass my host or my laptop location. I have to pass the container location. So that is why this path will be taken into consideration: opt, Airflow, and output files, not the output files which is in my laptop, like /user/money, something like that. No, that will not work. Okay, or maybe that should work, but no, container won't know that location. Maybe it's binding, but it won't know. So this path has to be passed. Okay, so now what I'll do, I'll go to the code again, and I'll just save this in one of the file. Okay, so here what I did, I converted this data into JSON. Okay, and then I gave the output path on which location I want to write. So this is in output files. Okay, and here is the file name that I gave for today's date, 4 January 2026, and this is the DAG result. Okay, then I'll open the file and write it, and then I'll print just one statement. So now I don't need this print statement because this was printing all the data. So that was basically filling up all the log page, right? So I just don't want to do it. Now here everything is in place. Now I think this DAG is sufficient to do what we were expecting, right? But again, that DAG is not the DAG that we write in real-time environment. So I'll talk about those things in a moment. But what was the purpose of today's DAG is it should be able to pull the data from API and push the data into one of the location, right? And it is doing that, but this is not doing incrementally. So we'll talk about incrementally, how it can be done incrementally, and there are few things which has to be talked about Python operators, so that we will do in a moment. Okay, so we are slowly moving towards what we are trying to achieve. I'll save this and I'll try to run again and see if everything is working as expected or not. Maybe there can be some error which while writing the code, right? So saved API output, right? It is saying that we have saved the API output to this file. Now this file should be shown here in the output files folder. I'll go to output files and I can see there is a data, right? We just pulled the data and kept it here onto into one of the location, and this location is basically called raw layer or in JSON layer, right? So I'll also talk about what exactly we did, right? We pulled the data, right? Pulled the data and stored to raw location. Okay, so what are we trying to build here? We are trying to build the historical data, not historical run, historical data. So we are trying to build historical data. Historical data means we want to store all the data for maybe next 6 months or a year. So let's understand the limitations of API. So I have the API, right? And API is fetching data from some of the transactional system, right? Maybe some database or somewhere. So it is hitting the API, storing it, or like saving it or pulling it, whatever API. So that part is being done by API. I am not concerned about what API is doing. I am just concerned what API is returning me, right? So API has a limitations. You cannot just pull last 6 month data from API, right? And you cannot just store every data in transactional system. So that is why we are trying to build a historical data where we can track the behavior of the users. Also we want to send the email maybe after a month, after 2 months, that you saved this product last month, would you like to buy? Maybe if there is a price drop, then would you like to buy, something like that we want to build, right? So we are trying to store the historical runs, and that is where we would need data like maybe 1st Jan 2026, then next file should be 2nd Jan 2026, right? And this is how we will store all the data for upcoming maybe 6 month, year or something. So there will be a decision that okay, in raw layer, so this will be a raw layer where everything data is stored as it is. There has been no transformation done on this data, right? This data is as it is. So this is what a raw layer data we have stored, or we are going to store in this fashion, right? And that is where every day when pipeline will run, we will run our pipeline on every day or a basically daily basis, right? Daily one, it will pull the entire data for previous day or those days, maybe at the same day or previous day, and then we want to store entire data. Of course we don't want to pull the data for today's, like okay, so today is 4th Jan, I don't want to pull the data for 4th Jan on 4th Jan itself. I want to pull the data for 4th Jan on 5th Jan, so that all the data has been collected for 4th Jan when I'm running on 5th Jan, right? So these are the things that has to be run, and that is where in last lecture I was talking about the DAG run, right? That if start date is 1st Jan, then and schedule interval is 24 hours. So the first run, right? First run will be on 2nd of Jan, and 2nd of Jan it will pull all the data from the 1st Jan, right? This is how entire data will be pulled on 2nd Jan for the first run, and for the second run again it will go and it will pull the entire data from this range, right? So this is how we pull the data. So that part also has to be done, right? Incrementally we have to do. Our code is running, but it is not building the history right now. No history building. And do you know why no history building is being done? This is not being done because we have the hard coded output path. If you go here, this is a hard coded output path. Every time if I run the code, it will overwrite the same file and it will store the latest file. That is what we don't want to build, right? So before going there, first I would like to introduce about the Python operator. So Python operator, the classic example. First we will understand what is the issue here, or what exactly we do in general in Python functions, right? So let's say I have a function name is test, right? So in test, most of the time we have some arguments passed in the code, right? And then those arguments are used. So I'm just using pass here. So how will I pass these arguments in the Python operator, right? So I have a Python operator, but if you understand the Python operator, we have a Python call label, right? And Python call label just take function name. So it will take a function name test, right? But how will I pass these arguments? These are required arguments. Required arguments like output path, right? Output path is one of the requirement that we may need. We may change the output path as well. Maybe we were storing in S3, but now we want to store it in ADLS or somewhere else. How will we do that, right? And then URL, maybe our URL is working on 5001 port today, but maybe tomorrow I change it to 5055. Then in that case also URL has to be updated, right? So those kind of things we want to, we don't want to hard code everywhere. We just want to pass into the argument, and I'll change just one place and everything will work in place, right? Also this URL or output path are mostly stored, sometime not always, stored in the variable. So these kind of values are also stored in variable, and some secret values are there. Then those values are stored in the secrets. So we are not going into the secrets part, but of course we will talk about variable in some upcoming lectures, not today. Today we are just focusing on how can I pass these arguments like URL or output path here and here, right? So that is where Python has three ways to pass that. Okay, the first one, right, first one is op underscore arguments, args. Okay, and this is a list. Then second is op underscore keyword arguments. Okay, KWARGS, keyword arguments, that will be a dictionary. And the third one is a template underscore dictionary. Template dictionary is also a dictionary, but there is another concept of template dictionary, because op keyword arguments and template dictionary both are same, right? These both are passing the dictionary. Then what is the use of this template dictionary? So template dictionary uses something called Jinja templating. Okay, I believe now op keyword argument also use, but I'm not sure, I'll have to re-verify it. But template dictionary is used only for that part. Not only, it can be it can have some extra information as well, but template dictionary mostly used for Jinja templating. So Jinja templating is, you can consider it as a normal variable which we use in f string, right? So if we write Python f string, so we pass one curly bracket and inside that we pass the variable name. The same way, if we are using Airflow uses Jinja templating, and instead of one curly bracket we have to pass two curly bracket, and inside that curly bracket your context can be passed at runtime, right? So let's say I am running the job today on 4th Jan, right? I'm running the job on 4th Jan, and API getting called for start date and end date as 4th. But someday it will, like after one day it will be 5th Jan, right? So how will I know this date, right? Here I have to pass the date, and that date should be a dynamic one. So basically at runtime, this will be decided by the context that what value has to be passed, and that is where we use template dictionary, right? So these are the three ways. I'm going to teach you about op arguments first and then template dictionary, right? Our code is good, we wrote the code, everything is working, but that is not how we write the code in production, right? So that is where I'll go again here and I'll fix some of the issues. The issue is like URL. I just want my URL to be passed here. So I'll pass URL, and I will pass also output path. I don't want my output path and URL to be here, right? So I did that context. Okay, context, anyways, it can be stored there, right? So now I don't need this URL. So I'll just comment this, right? Because I'm already getting it into the function from where this is getting called, right? And then output path I don't need now. So I need it, but I don't need here right now in the function. I don't need a hard coded value. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a op args here, op underscore args, and op args is a dictionary. Inside dictionary, this argument has to be in order. So first order is URL, so first value should be URL, right? So here I'll go and pass the URL. I'm not getting suggestion, right? Yeah, I got the suggestion. And then the second one is the output path. So I got the output path as well, and this is how I am going to pass everything, right? Why there is some error? So if you see here, I use op underscore args and I pass URL at the first location because URL was at first location and this one was at second location. So I gave the output path as second location and everything should work as expected. And now my code is a little bit clean. I'm not doing hard coding there, right? Just one place it is being done here, right? Okay. Now I'll go again and I should run this. I'll just trigger this again and this should work. See, everything is working as expected. Now, one of the issue that we talked about in last lecture, where we were talking about interval start date and interval end date, which was coming same, right? And that is where now I'm going to introduce, like I got the answer. I raised that concern on GitHub bug page and I got the answer. And the answer is, now instead of schedule, right, like in place of schedule, we'll have to import some of the libraries like cron interval, something like that. I'm forgetting the name. Wait, I'll just bring the name. So this is the library that I have to use now. Cron data interval timetable, and there is cron data timetable. So there are two. Now if you are not passing anything like this classes like this, then in that case your job will be considered as logical date, start date and end date will be same. But if you want it to be interval aware DAG, then in that case this class has to be used. So I'm just going to pass this class here, right? And this class takes two arguments. First is cron and second is time zone. Okay, so here in time zone, I like in the Hindi tutorial when I was teaching, I was using the Indian time zone, but that was really confusing and I would suggest not to use. Now what I'm going to do here, I'm going to use UTC here. Okay, and for UTC we can bring in from airflow.utils.timezone, we can bring UTC. So time zone will be UTC and the cron is I'm going to run on daily basis at 12 midnight. Okay, again I am stressing on the point here, I did change the time zone from UTC to IST, Indian Standard Time, and that is where a lot of confusion was happening. So I just change it again to UTC and I'm not going to show you those confusing things. If you really want to run your time, like you really want to change the time zone to IST, then I don't know how many places you will get confused. So that's why I would stick with UTC for now and for always, I believe, because this issues we have faced in the real-time industry as well, and that was pretty difficult to debug also. Okay, so this part is done. Now my job will be DAG, like this DAG will be aware about interval. So if I run the script now and I'm saying I'll start from 1st Jan, right, until the today is 4th Jan, right? So I'm going to run so I'm going to get data for 1st, 2nd and 3rd, because 4th, once 4th is completed, then on 5th I will get the data of 4th, and that is what we are going to do incrementally, right? On 1st, to get the first data we should run it on 2nd, then only we'll get the data. That's why start date is 1st Jan. I hope that is clear, because in last lecture also I talked about that, and in today's video also I talked about this part, right? How the execution will work in the incremental nature. Okay, so output is done. Now I'll just remove this, right? Okay, there is some issue, still we are not done, right? Why we are not done? Because start date and end date for our API is still hard coded. But how come if this will be hard coded, then every time we'll pull the data, it will be always from 4th of Jan. So that is where we will take this help of context variable. And in last lecture I talked about context variable in detail, and what I'm going to use here, DS to start date and end date, and rather than using here hard coded value, I'll pass start date and here I'll replace with end date. So now if my job runs, right, it will pull the data based it will basically pass the start date and end date based on the context execution date. So now my DAG is aware about the time interval as well, and this is also talking about the this thing, start date and end date. Maybe you won't be able to see the difference here by using this cron data interval timetable, because I am running on a daily basis. But if you want to run really on hourly basis or some other frequency, then in that case it is really going to help you a lot to find out the last date, right? Last time. The API, the DAG which I used to test those portion, I'm going to show you here. I did it in test DAG 1. So if you see here, I am running this DAG every hour at 0th minute. I'm not talking about this Indian time zone because that was really confusing for me. So I started this DAG from 3 Jan every 1 hour, and if I go and see what was the run details, right? So I'll go to the DAG again, and I'm going to talk about this print execution dates, and I'm going to run. Maybe I'll just pick any one. So this is the diagram, and here timetable. So first thing, I was just exploring this from where this method is getting called. So this is the method. This is the class basically getting used here, cron data interval timetable. If you are directly using schedule equal to cron, then it will be cron data timetable, something like that. Interval will not be there, and that is how we'll come to know, okay, that was the mistake that I was making yesterday, right? And print actual date. Now you see, period start date is 7:30, period end date is 8:30. Last day same time was coming, but now it is, since DAG is running for every 1 hour. So now we understand that if we want to pull the data, then start date should be 7:30, end date should be 8:30. So data from 7:30 to 8:30 will be pulled in the next run. So that is how incremental loading will be done on a hourly basis. On a daily basis still we are fine, but on a daily basis it will make a lot of sense now by using this class, right? Cron data interval timetable. I'm forgetting the name again and again. So our start date is good, end date is good, and we are running the DAG. Okay, now since we want to run the DAG for all the days, right? So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to do catch up equal to true also, right? So if I do catch up equal to true, means basically it will run for first, second, third. Fourth will not run. Fourth will run on 5th of Jan, right? So this is the final DAG that we wrote, and now we are going to see everything in action. So I'll go to Airflow, right? I will go to the DAG. I will delete this DAG. Okay, I'll delete all the metadata because there are things that we changed, right? So I'll delete all the metadata. Now I'm going here. Okay, I think I did open the wrong one. So see here, this is the DAG which we have to run now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just unpause this. I unpaused it, and now if I go here, I can see multiple runs will be there. How many runs would be there? 3. First Jan, second Jan, and third Jan. Fourth Jan will still not be there. If you see here, first Jan, okay, dates are first Jan itself, second, third, and fourth. Okay, run after is changing. Okay, we'll go inside and we'll see what is going on here. I went inside and I can see saved file at. Okay, there is another mistake that we made here, is we did not change the date. So if we did not change the date, file will get overwritten, and this is what we were talking about in one of the in this video itself. Few minutes back we were talking about this, that file will get overwritten, and this is the same thing happened right now. That is where our template dictionary will come into the picture, and it will help us to fix our DAG, right? So what I'm going to do, rather than using our OP arguments, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use template dictionary rather than this, right? I will have a template dictionary, and inside this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pass this dates, right? Now OP arguments is there, but in OP arguments I just want the URL, not this path, right? So I'll just control X here, and I'll pass here as output path equal to this, right? Already I'm getting suggestion. So if you see here, OP arguments is still a dictionary which just pass one URL value, and now template dictionary pass the output path, and output path will have this. So output path should be a string, okay? And here you can see it already gave the suggestion for Jinja templating. So you already know that DS is the time on which this execution was being run. So DS is getting passed inside 2 curly bracket, and everything is inside output path. Now if I pass here, now I don't have output path, right? So I'll just remove this. I just have the URL. Now output path will give the error. So how will I bring the output path here now? So output path will be bring from context. So template dictionary will be set it inside the context template dictionary, and inside template dictionary we already have the output path. So this output path will be passed, and now if we run the DAG, every time DAG will have a different dates, and that date will basically generate the file for a different date, right? And that is how we will build the incremental pipeline with keeping all the history in raw layer or in JSON layer. Now I think our DAG is completely should be up and running without any error, right? So I'll go to this DAG again. What I am going to do again, because I'll have to clear the entire DAG and wait for 30 seconds to get it reparsed. Now this is again reparsed, okay, and this will run at every midnight from 1st of Jan. What I'm going to do, I'm going to just unpause it and now see everything in action. I'll go inside run. Now you understand every UI details as well, right? I'll go to the middle one, the second one. I'll go inside this, and now if you see here, DAG back, save the API output. Now you see here, it saved the data for 2nd Jan, right? It ran for 3rd Jan, and it ran on 2nd Jan, and it stored the data for 2nd Jan. The same way you can play with the dates now, but you understand what I'm trying to say here, right? Now if I go to the first run, on the first run it will store the data for 1st Jan. It should save the data for 1st Jan. So now 3 runs are there, 3 output files should be there in our this output files. See, 1st, 2nd and 3rd, these 3 files are there, and the 4th one is due to the mistake that we did not delete it. So what I am going to do, because this one is not the one that it ran from the code, it was earlier created. So what I am going to do, I am going to again delete it, because anyway I should delete it, because the code the DAG which ran for 1st, 2nd and 3rd, that is why we are getting data for these 3 dates, right? And the 4th one is due to which basically hard coded dates that we passed. So this ran for 1st, 2nd and 3rd. Hopefully now you understand how incremental loading is happening, and now we wrote the code also which can do the incremental loading. So this is the DAG which will do the incremental loading based on this schedule interval, and we are also using this template dictionary, OP args. We can use all 3, OP args, OP keyword args and template dictionary. Then I think we are done for today's video. Everything is working as expected. So whatever we had planned for today, we almost did everything, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to summarize it, what all things we learned today. Okay, so first thing, we talked about API to pull the data and push the data, right? So when we were pulling the data from API, we had to understand about the password, right? So password will be protected, and it should be stored somewhere in vault, not hard-coded value. But again, when we will be talking about the connection, then in that case also I'll take the same example, right? And we will learn about that. Also variable I did not talk about today. So variable is one of the good thing that we can do. I think when I was talking about Airflow UI walkthrough, in that lecture I was talking about variable and connections, right? So in API password we did, and then we pulled the data, right? This is what we did, pull the data. Then second thing, output files. We understand how output files and mounting text in action, right? Then what all things we learned, we talked about Python, and Python operator has 3 ways to pass the arguments, and we talked about all 3. First one was OP args, then OP keyword args, and the third one was template dictionary. Okay, did we talk about anything else? Yeah, we talked about what was the name, cron data interval timetable, right? So data interval aware DAG. So we talked about this as well. So these are the major things that we talked about, and also about incremental loading in action, right? We were talking about everything in notepad, right, in the last lecture, but we now see how incremental load happens in action. So all those things are done. So now we are done for today's lecture. We will meet in the next lecture. Till then, bye bye.